And time for assembly. I mean, literally, that is as quick as it is. Spring back onto that side of the detent, and it should sit in there fairly comfortably. There we go. It's got like essentially a perfect allocation there. Then this is your other diaphragm. This is also made up of two gaskets, you can probably see, and that comes with the gasket set, so that can sit on top there. And you'll see these are what they call the reed valves just on the sides here. I'll just point them out. That there and that there, and that basically they act as like flapper valves that basically allow the fuel in and out as they go through various circuits. And so to assemble that part there, I can then put that on top there, and that essentially is all quite fiddly doing it one-handed. I'll have to get a head cam at some point. But yeah, so essentially that just goes straight on the top there, and you can see that's sort of sandwiched in. Now what I'll do is I'll continue on this side, and I've got my which is essentially the primer valve diaphragm, as well as also what is considered the float bowl where your fuel comes in, and this is under spring pressure, and this diaphragm essentially meters that. And like I said, you line the two holes at the top with these two pins, and then you've got one further hole over there. So clearly that won't fit. Spin it around, line it up, and voila, you are in business. And then you've got your priming body, and same again, that's also got its own alignment mark. So as long as these pins are going on to those into these holes, you are in business. So once again, that's on the top there, and that should line the whole thing up as it's going through. Now easy peasy part. Now you just basically screws in, find all of them, and just standard stuff with torquing things up. Always do them sort of diagonally, and with these screws you really don't have to tighten the hell out of them. They're essentially the gaskets and will do all the work. So let me just nip these things up, and then I'll get back to you and we'll do the main jet side. For those of you just dive right into these things, you sometimes come up against some of the similar dilemmas I do, which is when you start putting things back together, you suddenly get to a situation where if you screw them back on, it can go in any direction. So for instance, the two holes here, top and bottom here, they could go on to that either way around. Now sometimes there's like a detent or a sort of a flange or something that will hold it, but a good way to identify which way it is that when you go to theoretically put it back on, orientate it in the direction where it was. So for instance, these were the feed and return valves for hoses for the fuel tank, which are down on the bottom, so that would theoretically go on, which means that the throttle body was on this side by my thumb, and we know that that was the throttle cable coming up in. So basically we need the metal bracket to be in line with the cable coming in, and that needs to mount on. So if I put that there like that, and we know that that is the direction that will be oriented with the fuel inlet and outlet over there. So you come back in. Okay, so we now know that for that to go on, that goes like that. So that theoretically would be like that. And then the final part would be, we now know that this side is the top, and that needs to be on the top. So basic stuff, just pretty much look to go and put that in, line it up, and you are, essentially quids in. Now the only other part to that is mounting this. Oh, this one-handed experience is awesome. I'll do that. Mounting this essentially the opposite side of the idle adjustment, and then sort of just balancing there, and you get your screws and you start your buttoning up a part of the game. And there we go. Let's just get that one in. Sorry, just blocking the light a bit there. And yeah, so that's that part. So from there, just screw these two in. Like I say, you don't have to over tighten the hell out of these. You don't have to be like Garth. You'll just strip them out. And then the final piece will be to put the screw back in, and then we'll go look back for reinstallation onto the strimmer. Okay, air screw, and try and see if you can find the specs for adjustment on this. These ones I tend to find, if it's anything like the motorbikes, you're normally sitting between sort of 2 1/4 to no more than 3 turns out. But what I would suggest, based on the fact that you can't really adjust the jetting, this is your, between this and your idle, your only two major adjustments, I would go all the way until you're seated. I would take 1 1/2 to 2 turns out initially, start running the strimmer, and then I'd hold it at about sort of like 1/8 to 1/4 throttle, and I would just adjust this until it starts, you hear it suddenly just sort of open up, just it's like it starts breathing, and that would be the point at which you are probably ideal for your current conditions, elevation, atmospheric pressure, temperatures, and all that sort of stuff. Also, don't tighten this down like you're, trying to tighten down like a flippin', 10 like a 18mm bolt or something. This is a very delicate thing, and geez, you seize that or shear that off inside there, get a new carburetor. You're not going to be playing that game any other way after that. And now we're on to assembly. So essentially just a reverse of what you did before. Carbon, obviously idle adjustment up top, cables going in on the bottom. You are connecting your two hoses. Make note of them before you start, but having done this on my side before, basically I've worked out that the near one stays with me, and the rear one, near one to near side, far one to inboard, and then these two high and low. So it is aligned as it would go on. This might not always be the case, so I would always suggest when you're starting with it, take some photos of it as you take each item off if you're not sure with what you're doing.